Good evening, PWCS families, and welcome to tonight's Family Engagement Series session. Tonight, we have the National Collegiate Athletic Association, or NCAA, initial eligibility. My name is Yanette Boyd, and I am the Supervisor for Family and Community Engagement. Tonight's session will be presented in the requested language of English and will be recorded. This time, I would like to welcome our presenter for this evening. Joining us tonight, we have Elizabeth Thompson. She is the Associate Director for Outreach and Education with NCAA. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Yanette, and good evening to everyone. I'm now going to share my screen, so give me just a moment here while I get this presentation up for you. Thumbs up if you can see my presentation, Yanette.
Good.
Perfect. Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. So as Yanette said, I am Elizabeth Thompson with the NCAA Eligibility Center. I oversee our outreach and education efforts here, and our job and our goal is to make sure that every young student athlete with an interest in pursuing playing a sport and earning a scholarship at the collegiate level has the opportunity and is well informed of what those academic requirements are and how to navigate that process. So things we're going to cover today is a bit of information about what the NCAA is and what sports are offered, more information about the Eligibility Center, registering with the NCAA so that you can stay on track to become eligible and eventually be certified to compete for an NCAA school. And then what the requirements are for Division I and Division II. We'll also talk a little bit about Division III and what that process looks like. And then we'll wrap things up with some recruiting information and leave you with some resources and contact information if you have questions after today. So I know many of you presented and submitted questions ahead of time. Most of those questions should be covered in the presentation this evening, but just know that if there's any questions that you have that maybe were not addressed, we have a customer service team that will be available to answer any of your questions for you after tonight's presentation. So a little bit of information about the NCAA. We are a governing body that oversees college sports at the NCAA Division I, II, and III level. Most people, when they think of the NCAA, think of what they see on TV, which is predominantly those larger Division I schools. But it's important to note that you see on this slide here, but that the majority of opportunities are actually at the Division II and Division III level. And in fact, Division III is actually our largest of our three divisions when it comes to the number of schools that are involved, student athletes, etc. So some really great information there for you to take a look at to realize that there are lots of opportunities. And if you have an interest in playing multiple sports, so maybe you play football and run track and field, there's more ability to be able to play multiple sports at the Division III level than some of the Division I and Division II schools due to time demands, training, etc. at those division levels. So keep all of those things in mind when selecting the school that is the right fit for you. Also, at this day and age in college athletics and how it's continuing to evolve, do not limit yourself to just one specific division from a recruiting perspective, because many student athletes are ending up at all three different division levels, or maybe eventually transferring from a D3 to a D2 or from a D2 to a D1. So I know a lot of people think like, oh, I want to go to a big Division I school, but do not limit yourself in the process to not thinking about Division II or Division III programs, which still are giving you access to scholarship money and to continue to play your sport beyond the high school level, because there are lots of opportunities available there. We have a really great interactive map on our website that allows you to search by your sport, by your division, to find out where those schools are located. So say you're interested in playing Division II beach volleyball. You might wonder, where are the schools located across the country that offer that sport? You can actually use this map to find where those are. It's color coded by sport. And when you select those things like sport and division, it will break down to a smaller number there for you. So it's a really great tool to use to do some research now at a younger age as to what schools you might be interested in. Like maybe they're on the West Coast or the East Coast or the North or the South, or in a big city versus a more rural area. All of these things are things that you should consider when doing your research to find the school that's the best fit for you. So next we're going to talk about the Eligibility Center, which is who I'm here on behalf of. So our role within the NCAA organization is that we're a department or a unit within the NCAA, and our job is to certify college-bound student athletes for collegiate competition. So think of us as like what we used to be called as like the clearinghouse, but we certify student athletes as eligible to compete so that there's fairness and equity across the association and across to all schools. So that way, if you show up on a Division II soccer field to play against another Division II school, those schools know their student athletes had to meet the same minimum academic requirements as the other team's student athletes in order to be able to compete. So we review your academics based on your school coursework from grades 9 through 12, and we'll talk about what courses we look at to make sure that you're meeting those minimum requirements. We also review your athletics participation to ensure, you didn't take more time off between high school and collegiate enrollment and to continue to compete in your sport, which could provide an advantage to you, a sporting advantage compared to another student. There are rules around that. So we look at all of those types of things in order to certify student athletes as eligible to compete at an NCAA school, because as we say, you are a student first and an athlete second. So it's important to know that you have met those academic requirements and will be able to balance a very schedule full of both academics and athletics. It is a very time consuming process, and we want to make sure that our student athletes are set up for success to be able to handle both of those things at the college level. So, when thinking about playing sports at the college level, there are three things that you need to be sure to track on that may have their own different set of requirements. So, first and foremost, you're going to need to do what is required to graduate high school. And your high school's graduation requirements may not be the same as every college admission office's requirements around the country. So, knowing what you need to do to graduate high school, knowing what, if you want to be a student athlete, what you need to do to be eligible to compete for a school. And those requirements that I'm going to cover may be different than your high school's graduation requirements, and they may be different than some colleges' admissions requirements. So it's important to know that not each of these things are the same and that you need to do your research on all of them. So don't assume that because you're cleared by the NCAA and meet our requirements, that necessarily translates to the same thing that you need to do to graduate high school or the same thing that you need to do to be admitted to NCAA school, because you have to apply to the school separately from being cleared by the NCAA. And while we have minimum national standards to compete for the NCAA schools, every college or university sets their own admission standards. So that may differ from school to school. And there are a couple of things to think about when applying to colleges to know that varies and is different from the NCAA. So the first piece that stands out the most is that we no longer require an SAT or ACT test score in order to be eligible to compete for the school. Now, hear that again. That's eligible to compete for the school. That is not to be admitted to the school. And if you can't get admitted to the school, you can never compete for that school because you have to be a student at that school to compete for that school. So, what that means is even though an SAT or ACT is not required to be a student athlete, it is in some instances still required at some schools to be admitted. So, I encourage student athletes, if you have an opportunity to take an SAT or ACT, do so. It will only help you in the admissions process. It also helps in the recruiting process. A lot of student athletes don't realize that, of like, well, why would I take it then if maybe the college I'm looking at is test optional or they don't require it? Why should I take it? Well, the truth is that coaches only have a set budget from a recruiting standpoint of scholarship dollars. So if a coach is looking at you and they're looking at another player that on the field, you guys line up pretty similarly. So say you both play, we'll use softball. Maybe you're both a pitcher in softball and your stats are pretty similar to another athlete that coach is recruiting. If the coach only has a set amount of dollars in his scholarship amount left, so say he only has, one full scholarship left and he needs a pitcher, but he also needs an outfielder. And you are a really strong student academically, but that other pitcher that he's looking at maybe isn't the best student. Well, guess what? You might be eligible for an academic scholarship at that coach's university. So then you only need 50% or 20% of a sports scholarship to cover your full cost of attendance to that school. That now gives that coach 80% of a scholarship that he can look for that outfielder. So that's where having an SAT score, an ACT score, and being a strong student academically can give you a leg up in the recruiting process if it costs less of the coach's budget to recruit you and allows them to make their budget go a longer way from a scholarships perspective. Not to mention, they're looking at things like, is this student going to bring down my team GPA, my graduation rate? Are we going to have to be on them about staying eligible? Are these things, am I going to have to watch for that? These are all things that coaches factor into the recruiting process, and not just how fast your pitch is and, what your reflex times are. So keep that in mind when making a decision on taking those test scores and on how you perform in the classroom, is that they do truly matter and they can impact your recruiting process. So next, we're going to talk about the registration process to make sure that every interested student athlete gets registered with the NCAA Eligibility Center. So the first step is to go to our website, which is eligibilitycenter.org. It will look like this, what you see here on the screen. And then right there in the center of the page, you see that blue circle with the white arrow down that says register. If you click on that blue circle, that's going to start the registration process for you. Best practice is to register before freshman year, but if you're already past that point and just now getting started, it's not too late. That's just a best practice that we recommend, because the classes that you take starting in 9th grade matter towards your eligibility, which is why it's important. The earlier you can register, the better, so that you're informed and taking the right courses and staying on track to being college eligible. So once you click on that button, you're going to be given the option of 3 different account types, and I'm going to talk to you about what each of those account types are. So the first type is our academic and athletics certification account. This is the account type that you need to go on an official visit to a Division I or Division II school to sign with a school. So if a school offers you a scholarship, which is what used to be called a national letter of intent, that program has gone away and it's now called an athletics aid agreement. So to sign with a school, like you see on the exciting signing days when people are choosing the hats and making their announcements, to do that, you have to first be registered with the NCAA and have this account type. Your school will then upload your official high school transcript, but then ultimately to receive a scholarship and to play for that NCAA Division I or II school, you have to have this account type. There is a one-time registration fee for the account, and there are fee waiver opportunities. So if you, for example, get free or reduced lunch or are eligible for a fee waiver on the SAT or the ACT, then you may qualify for the fee waiver with us. You can select in your account when you get to the registration process at the end to submit payment. Fee waiver is one of the options, and you can read that criteria there in the process, and that will help you determine if you feel you're eligible. If you are, you would select fee waiver as your payment option, which would then change your status to fee waiver pending. And then that would send a prompt over to your high school's primary or secondary contact to have them sign off on that fee waiver. And then it typically by the end of that day or the beginning of the next day would show the fee waived on your account. So our second account type is an athletics certification account. This is primarily for international student athletes who plan to compete at a Division III school. So if you've ever played for a team based outside of the United States, that would qualify you as being an international student athlete. So, or if you started high school outside of the US and are now attending a high school inside of the US and plan to go to a Division III school, this would be the account type. But for the most part, that first account type that I talked about would be the one appropriate for tonight's group that we're talking to. And then the last account type is where I suggest everyone start. So unless you're already actively being recruited by an NCAA coach and you've not yet registered with the NCAA, then I suggest everyone start here. And the reason that I say that is because it is free, and free is what we want, right? So there is no cost associated with it. This gets you the information that you need, and it gets you starting in this process. That way, if say you're, in 9th grade and and you're like, maybe I want to, I'm not really sure. I decided to attend this webinar so that I could learn more about it, but I don't know if in 3 years I'm going to want to play in college. Well, then what you should be doing is doing everything to keep that door open for yourself, signing up for this free profile page, making sure that you're taking the right classes. You're going to get reminders about what to do after freshman year, after sophomore year, and so on. Things that you need to do, ways that you can promote yourself to college coaches to help in that recruiting process. And then at any point in that process, if a coach comes calling, so say that summer after sophomore year, the beginning of your junior year, you get a DM on social media, or you get a phone call, or a coach comes to one of your events and sees you play and starts to recruit you, then there's a button in that free profile page that says transition my account. That's where you can transition that free profile page over to that first account type that we talked about, which is what you need to play for a Division 1 or 2 program. And it'll walk you through the process. All of your information transitions over so you don't have to re-register. It saves all of that. So this is where I suggest starting. Also, if we have any young student athletes that are participating in basketball, specifically in certified non-scholastic basketball events. So BBCS, if you do AAU tournaments, summer leagues, etc., that require BBCS registration, which is basketball certification system, which is what a lot of these leagues have to be registered for. This is the account type that you need in order to be registered for those events as well. And once you register, you're given a 10-digit NCAA ID number. That's what you would need for those events to communicate to the coaches. But that's also what you need in the college recruiting process. So if a coach reaches out and says, are you registered with the NCAA? That's the 10-digit ID number that you would give them, and then immediately get in there and transition your account over to the full certification account so that you can be actively recruited by that coach or that school. So next, we're going to talk about what the certification outcomes are for each division. So in Division 1, there are 4 possible outcomes. There's an early academic qualifier, which is for those student athletes that are really strong in the classroom, very well prepared, have gotten a lot of their core courses out of the way early, and very high GPAs. We'll talk about that. Then we have a qualifier, an academic redshirt, and a non-qualifier. So we'll briefly talk about what each of these are. So an early academic qualifier is when we look at your transcript for all coursework completed from 9th grade up through prior to the start of your senior year. So prior to 7th semester. So in looking at 9th, 10th, 11th grade, and then potentially any summer school that you did after 11th grade, we're looking for 14 core course credits in the NCAA approved core courses, and at least a minimum of a 3.0 GPA in those 14 core courses. If you complete that, then guess what? You're done, which is awesome. One less thing to worry about senior year, one less hurdle on your plate of things to worry about. As an early academic qualifier, you're immediately eligible for athletics aid or that scholarship, and to practice and to compete for a Division 1 program. So that's something to consider as you're moving through this process. If you're, a freshman joining, work towards that. That's going to be great. That's going to help in your recruiting process as well. But the focus here, aside from the early academic qualifier, which is what we would love everyone to be, is Division 1 qualifier. So Division 1 qualifier is defined as scholarship eligible, practice, and competition eligible immediately upon arrival to a NCAA Division 1 college or university. And in order to be a Division 1 qualifier, you must earn 16 core course credits in the required subject areas. You must also have completed 10 of those 16 must be in English, math, or science. 10 core courses done, 7 of which, are in English, math, or science. So what that means is if you have 16 core courses by graduation, looking at 9th through 12th, prior to your senior year, so looking at 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, you have to have 10 of those 16 done. And then when looking at those 10, 7 of those have to be in English, math, or science. So that's what we call the 10-7 requirement. So that's why it's important to be proactive, to plan starting in ninth grade that you're taking the right classes so that you'll meet that requirement. And because if you don't meet the 10-7 requirement, then that means at best you're an academic redshirt, which means you have to sit out your freshman year and can't compete at the school. And then lastly, aside from also being a high school graduate, is that you must have a minimum core course GPA in those 16 core courses of a 2.3 or higher. And then lastly is an academic redshirt. So as an academic redshirt, as I mentioned, if you don't meet that 10-7 progression, and or if you do not have the 2.3 GPA, but maybe you have anywhere from a 2.0 to a 2.29, then you would only be an academic redshirt, meaning you can receive your scholarship the first year and you can practice the first term, but you cannot compete with the team. And the reason it says practice the first term, which for some schools, if they're on a semester schedule, it would be practice first semester, is because after that first semester, whether or not you're eligible for practice the second semester is no longer based on your high school coursework, but it's based on your college coursework. So if you've completed enough credit hours and gotten a high enough GPA at the college level. So this is the requirement as a high school graduate to be an academic redshirt. And then a non-qualifier, I'm sure you've guessed that definition by now. That means you would not be eligible for scholarship, practice, or competition. So you would not be able to have any involvement with the athletics department as a student athlete during your first year of full-time enrollment at that college or university. So next we're going to touch on Division II certification outcomes. They are similar to Division I, with one slight difference that I'll talk about here in just a moment. But the thing I tell people, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of information you're hearing tonight, keep in mind all of this information will be in the resources at the end of this presentation. They're on our website. But just know that if you aim for Division I eligibility, by default, you will also be Division II eligible. So if mentally you're feeling like it is almost 7 o'clock at night, I've had a long day, I am checked out, just hear me when I say this. If you aim for D1 eligibility, by default, you will be D2 eligible. All of the requirements line up the same. Division II's is just slightly lower. So again, if you hit D1 EAQ, early academic qualifier, by default, you would hit it for Division II as well. So you'll see that there. And then the only difference that I mentioned, D2, is a 2.2 GPA in 16 core courses. D1 was a 2.3, D2 just slightly lower at a 2.2. D2 does not have that 10-7 requirement that D1 had. And then the last piece for Division II, and I love this change that D2 did because I'm a product of Division II very proudly. So I love that they made this change because it gives really great opportunities for student athletes to continue to pursue college, to continue to get a degree when we know that life happens. We know that you may have had a death in the family, or you may have had a significant change in your home, or something may have happened, or maybe you were recruited late in this process and you didn't know until junior year that you were, really good at your sport and got some starting opportunity, and then coaches came. We understand that stuff may have happened that resulted in you not being eligible at the Division I level, or even fully eligible at the Division II level. So Division II made a change to do away with a non-qualifier. So what that means is, as long as you are a high school graduate and you are admitted to that Division II school through their admissions office, at minimum, you can receive a scholarship and practice with the team in the first year. So that's a huge win because we understand things happen. It's the D2 equivalent to redshirt, if you're trying to think of an equal term there. So you'd be eligible for your scholarship and to practice as long as you're a high school graduate and you have been admitted to that school. So just work with that D2 school for more information and about their admissions process to make sure that that is an option that they're offering you of that scholarship. So Division three, as I mentioned towards the beginning, there wasn't as much information on Division three. You won't see information here on academic requirements. The reason for that is that Division three does not offer sports scholarships. Everything is academic or merit-based scholarships. Now, like we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, tons of opportunities to play a sport at a Division three school. The difference is just that any scholarship money that they're giving is not based on your athletic performance. It's based on your academic or merit-based performance. So just know that you aren't seeing information here based on academic requirements for D3 because they don't have sports scholarships. The big change that just came about within the last 2 months or so, or 2 or 3 months for Division three, is that effective next fall. So that means this year's seniors, all students have to be registered with the NCAA who plan on enrolling at a Division three school. So if you're a student athlete and you're thinking of going D3 and you're thought, well, in the past, I never had to register because that's only D1 and D2, that is now changing. But also know that that free profile page account is sufficient. So if you're being recruited by, or you know you're going to a D3 school and want to play a sport there, make sure you create that free profile page account because you will need that for enrollment next fall at a Division three school. So I mentioned there's going to be resources throughout the presentation. If you have your smartphones and aren't also watching this from your smartphone, then go ahead and take that out and you can scan these QR codes for a full breakdown of the Division I academic standards, including where those 16 core courses need to be. So on that resource, you'll see things like 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of science, etc. So all of that information is on that flyer for you, as well as our Division II resource and then a D3 resource that goes over the amateurism standards for Division III, again, predominantly for those international student athletes or students who have participated on an internationally based sports team. So next, we're going to talk briefly about recruiting. So the first piece in this is, what do we mean when we say recruited? Everyone might define that differently. We hear all the time from high schools that say like, hey, I had a student come in my office and they're saying like, the coach really wants me or the school really wants me. And our system is showing that they're not being recruited. So a couple of things to look at here. We also govern the rules around recruiting, what's permissible, what's not permissible. All of our rules are voted on by our NCAA member schools. So there are different committees that get together to form those rules around how early they can recruit you, which they can start sending you recruiting materials through the mail in as young as 9th grade. But for the most part, active recruiting does not start until about your 11th grade in junior year in high school. There are some sports where it opens up June 15th after your sophomore year. So in that summer after 10th grade, some recruiting can start. But for the most part, it's typically the first day of classes of your junior year. So we define active recruiting as if any of the activities that you see on the screen there you're receiving from an NCAA coach, that's considered recruiting activity. Phone calls, text messages, DMs on social media, emails. If they watch you at an event, so say you're participating in, a travel team in the summer and they're going to watch it, or they come to watch you at your school. And keep in mind, there are rules around what's called evaluation periods where they can watch you play, but they can't have communication with you. So if you're thinking like, man, that coach came, but they didn't say anything to me, it might be a time of year on your sports recruiting calendar that they can watch you, but they can't have communication with you. So those are all things that are involved in that recruiting process. They might invite you to campus and they might offer to pay for that trip to come visit their campus. That's considered recruiting. That's what we call an official visit. And then there are visits where they might invite you to campus, but they're not offering to pay. That's what we call an unofficial visit. So all of those things are considered to be recruiting activities. And then once that recruiting activity starts, that's where it is so important for you to first be registered with us here at the NCAA, because they need to place you on their IRL. That's an institutional request list. That's where you need that 10-digit NCAA ID number that you received when you registered with the NCAA. if you're now thinking, well, I registered with the NCAA, but what did I do with that number? You can find it by logging into your NCAA account. It's in the upper right-hand corner of your account, right next to your name, underneath that NCAA ID number, followed by the 10-digit number. So as I mentioned, each sport has different recruiting calendars, different time periods. So it's if you emailed a coach or coaching staff and you didn't get a response, it's not necessarily that they aren't interested. It's just might be that it's a time of year in which they are not allowed to respond to your emails. Or maybe you're a sophomore right now and they're not allowed to have communication with you, so they can't respond to that email. So what you can do is if you go to our website, and I think I have the on the next slide here. If not, it's on our resources at the end. But our website for the recruiting calendars, it's where you can search by division and by sport. So for example, Division I men's basketball has a different recruiting calendar than Division I women's basketball has. And in that same vein, Division I's men's basketball is different than D2 and D3. It's also different than track and field or cross country. So just be sure that you're looking at the sport that you're interested in and the division level to know what those are. So there are some sport specific recruiting calendars. If you don't see your sport listed, then check the list where it says all other sports, and that will show you where you can find if it's all under one all other sport recruiting calendar. So different terminology that you will find in one of our resources coming up, which is our guide to the college bound student athlete, helps define some of these terms that you see along the top. So what is a contact period? What's an evaluation period, quiet period, dead period, etc. So for example, the what I just mentioned a moment ago, that maybe a coach comes to one of your games or events and watched you play but didn't talk to you. It's probably because his sport or her sport is in an evaluation period, but it's not in a contact period. So that might mean they can come watch you play and they can visit your high school, but they can't have communication with you. So it's just going to vary. Also, if it's a recruiting shutdown, which is really common, like over the Christmas break, a lot of sports completely shut down like the week of Christmas or Christmas Eve through the day after Christmas. It varies per sport, but in a recruiting shutdown, they're not allowed to do any recruiting. So no phone calls, no text messages, no visits, no coming to watch showcases, none of that. So just do your research to find out more information on your recruiting calendar. And then before I get into official versus unofficial visits, one best practice that I like to tell student athletes in the recruiting process, let's use the example of track and field, because I was involved in track and field. So you have a head coach, and then you have position coaches. So I was a thrower, so there was a throws coach. So when looking at a school to determine the school that's the best fit for you, your head coaches are, if they're really wanting you, they're going to be really actively recruiting you, trying to win you over. But day in and day out, that's not who your coach is going to be that you're interacting with. So maybe that head coach sold you in the recruiting process, but if you don't have a good working relationship with your position coach, that how your experience is at that college or university may be very different than how the recruiting process went for you. So keep that in mind if you are a sport that has position coaches, to think about that. And then another piece of that is if you are out there trying to promote yourself to get recruited, one thing that we suggest is going to the websites of the universities that you're interested in, click on their athletic department, and then go down to their staff directory. They list the names and the email addresses of all of the coaching staff for every sport. If I'm interested in, being recruited by the University of Virginia, since we're here in Virginia tonight, I'm not going to email the head coach of my sport, because chances are that coach is getting upwards in the recruiting season of 500 and 600 emails a day, especially at a large university. What I'm going to do is I'm going to email an assistant coach, a grad assistant, a position coach. I am going to email a lower level coach that I know is doing a lot of that initial fielding of the recruiting process, to make sure that I'm getting that attention and getting them to recognize me. So put your name, your NCAA ID number in the subject line of the email. If you're playing for any notable travel teams, or if you're in a sport that's ranked, like put some of those things as catch lines in that email so that they know, like, oh, okay. And then create a sports resume that you include in that. So your name, your position, your sport, if there's ranking, if there's teams, your NCAA ID number, where you are from a GPA standpoint, what's your overall high school GPA? Are you on track for meeting NCAA academic requirements? If you have an SAT or an ACT, include that, because they want to know first thing that when they're fielding these emails, can I get them admitted to my school? If you're emailing and you have a 1.9 GPA, a lot of those coaches are going to be like, I can't get them into my school. Like, I'm not even going to bother in the recruiting process with this because this is going to immediately be off the table. So putting in information that they need in that recruiting process helps. And a lot of coaches say they want to see some type of highlight video. So putting in your social media channels, being mindful of what you're putting on your social media, but also if you create like a YouTube video or something that you can link them to that's showing you in your sport and your ability to play, if it's an individual sport times. So if you're a swimmer, how long does it take you to swim the 100 free? Put that time in there. Also do research and find out what are the times in that event at student athletes at that school. If you're 25 seconds or so off of the time of their swimmers in that event, that might be a struggle for you to compete at that school or get recruited at that school. So maybe start looking at some other Division 1 programs or Division 2 programs. And a lot of students think that all D1 schools are more competitive than Division 2. That's not true. My Division 2 school, our swimming team was national champions with Olympians from all across the world. So that D2 program at the national championship level was probably better than a large majority of the Division 1 schools, because we're looking at 300 plus schools at each division level. So a D2 national championship program school is not worse than a Division 1 program. What defines whether or not a school is a Division 1 or a Division 2 school is the number of sports that they offer. So we have 24 sports across our 3 divisions. So a Division 1 school may offer 22 of those 24 sports, while a Division 2 school may only be able to offer 16 sports. Still highly competitive, they just may not offer as many sports. It's also the campus size, the overall student body population. So a Division 2 school might have 4 or 5,000 students on campus, while a Division 1 school might have 25, 35, even 40,000 students on campus. Size of athletics facilities, all of those things factor into what is a Division 1 school. And it's not necessarily the level of competition in the sport. So think about all of those things in the recruiting process and use those tips and tricks to help promote yourself when looking at trying to get recruited by an NCAA coach. That being said, we'll talk a little bit about official versus unofficial visits. So I mentioned this earlier, but an official visit is when that college or university pays for you to visit that school. So typically they're offering or extending a visit for you and potentially a family member to come on that visit with you. And you first have to be registered with the Eligibility Center. That's a requirement for any official visit. You must be on that school's institutional request list. So that's how they activate your account. And then your high school has to upload your official high school transcript before you can set foot on campus for that official visit. And then an unofficial visit is just one that is not paid for by that college or university. That would be you or your family driving down to a local school or on your own finances, funding to go visit a particular college or university anywhere. More facts about the difference between Division 1, 2, and 3 official and unofficial visits. I like to point this out because I don't want students to think if a Division 2 visit seems different from a Division 1 visit, it's not because that Division 2 school wants you more or that Division 1 school wants you more. The rules as to what can be provided vary depending on the division the school is. So you can see the example here for that. So let's look at meals, for example. So on an official visit at the Division 1 level, up to 3 meals per day for you and up to 4 family members. That's pretty cool, right? Like if you brought your whole family, mom, dad, brother, sister, and you, they're paying for everybody. All three meals all day long. Wow, they must really like me. Like they're rolling the red carpet out. And then you go and visit a Division 2 school and you're like, they only paid for my food. Why didn't they cover my mom or my dad's or my brother or my sister? Or, my aunt took me, grandma took me. It's because they're not allowed to, because D2 rules say that they can only cover your meals on an official visit. So just keep that in mind as you experience that potentially the offer of an official visit, knowing that what's able to be offered is going to vary from each division. On an unofficial visit, which again, that's the one where they cannot pay for your transportation, so they can't fly you out, can't pay for your housing, etc. There are some things that they can provide you on an unofficial visit. So, for example, Division 1 cannot give you any complimentary meals on an unofficial visit, but Division 2 can actually provide one meal for you and your family members on an unofficial visit. So, think about it. When it's official, they can only give you a meal. When it's unofficial, which means they aren't paying for the transportation, they can actually pay for you and one of your family members. So, lots of kind of tricky nuances here to official versus unofficial visits. They can give you some complimentary tickets. That's pretty much the same across all three divisions. So if you're there, they know that you're coming to visit, they can throw some tickets that way towards you. But really, if you have the opportunity to make unofficial visits to any local schools around you, I highly encourage it, because the more chance that you get to visit these schools and know what's the right fit for you, those are important things in making the right decision for the school for you. So next thing are just some reminders about topics to discuss with NCAA coaches. A lot of student athletes that I've talked to have said, like, they offered me a scholarship. I'm so excited. And I'm like, great. What kind of scholarship is it? And they're like, what do you mean it's a scholarship? I'm like, is it a full scholarship? Is it a partial scholarship? Is it a 1 year scholarship? Is it 4 year scholarship? And they're like, I don't know, it's just a scholarship. Like, these are questions that you want to ask, because maybe one school is offering you a full scholarship, another school is only offering you a partial scholarship, and you might have to come up, or your family might have to come up with tens of thousands of dollars to cover the cost to attend that school. So asking questions about what that scholarship looks like, what you have to do to maintain that scholarship. Is that scholarship a 1 year scholarship that's renewable at the end of the year? So in some sports that aren't multi-year scholarship sports, you will have a meeting at a coaches meeting at the end of your season to talk about how the season went and if they're renewing your scholarship for the next year. So that kind of varies across divisions as well. So just make sure to ask those questions in the recruiting process. If at any time you're not really sure like what a coach is telling you, our contact information is here at the end of it. I always encourage you, ask questions. And what I mean by ask questions is, like, don't just ask the coaches, check up on the information that they're telling you. So if a coach says, like, oh no, we're not allowed to give a full scholarship, or that's not here, call the NCAA and ask, say, hey, what's the rule in this sport? Can this be done? This is what I'm being told. Like, you are your biggest advocate. Like, this is your future and your collegiate student athlete experience. And you get to help in making these calls, in asking these questions, in making these choices. So do that. Ask about playing time. You're going from potentially being, a big fish in a little pond to going to the collegiate level where, like, maybe you thought, I started every game my senior year. Like, I was, all state. I had all of these great opportunities. Why? I just assume I will be a starter in college. When coach all the time in recruiting you is thought, all right, this is an 18-year-old incoming freshman. I have no intention of playing him or her freshman year. They're going to practice, they're going to train with the team, and they're going to sit the bench. They're going to redshirt freshman year. Some student athletes have a really hard time transitioning from being the star player in high school to not getting any playing time their freshman year, because psychologically, the mental health impact that can take, if that wasn't communicated ahead of time, you have a very different expectation as to what that freshman year is going to be like for you versus how it actually pans out. Some of that can affect how you do in class, which can affect your grades, which can affect your eligibility. You don't want to get in a situation where you didn't have those conversations upright, you didn't ask those hard questions, and then as a result, you ended up going down that path and potentially losing your scholarship after first semester or after first year. So ask questions about that. Ask about team time demands. You might have 5:30 a.m. practice followed by an 8:30 a.m. class. You might have mandatory study tables after practice in the evening. So your days could start at 5:30 in the morning and not end until 9 o'clock at night every day. So just talk and find out what the time demands are of the team. Some sports, like we had at the Division II level, all freshmen had mandatory study tables. Like that was a requirement freshman year to make sure that we were doing well so that we would be set up for success, so that our team GPA would maintain and that our progress towards degree would be on track. The other piece of that with your eligibility, I know it can sound overwhelming to be like, oh my gosh, I've got to practice and I've got to train and I've got to go to class. Like it is very overwhelming. But I want you to know that student athletes actually graduate at a higher rate than just a standard student on college campuses. And the reason for that is because of the support system that is going to be around you. You will have access to tutors, you will have access to academic advisors, you will have an entire support system provided by the athletic department to ensure your success at the collegiate level. So you will have lots of opportunities. There's degree completion programs. For the Division I level, there's information they'll have to provide you and share with you about core guarantees. That's a certain amount of information and training, like financial literacy, opportunities to complete your degree, et cetera, that they are required to provide as a Division I program. So just know that while it is a lot of information and it sounds stressful, you are being set up for success if you utilize those things around you and consider that some of those things are a requirement for a reason. Some additional best practices: talking with your support system around you. Utilize your coaches to talk about what level of competition they think you should aim for based on your abilities in the sport. We talked about this, but registering with the Eligibility Center, making sure you do that and you stay on track of what you need to do academically in the classroom. I know we aren't the best at checking emails, myself included, but making sure that you do check your email often. Whatever email address that you use to register with your NCAA account is the email address that we will communicate with. So if you have something outstanding on your account, which is needed for eligibility, you will get a task assigned in your NCAA account, which will prompt an email to you letting you know. So be sure to check your email often to see if you've gotten any communication with us. And then I mentioned this a few times throughout tonight, but work just as hard in the classroom as you do in your sport. It really will impact your recruiting process. It will set up so many more opportunities for you, and it will only have positive impacts for you. The average, so when we look at the data from the number of high school student athletes to go on to play at the college level, overall, it's about 2%. So that is not impacted by the transfer portal. That is a standing data on there are 8 million high school student athletes across the US. Only 2% of those to go on to play at the college level. So it's a little over 100,000 student athletes a year, roughly between 80 and 100,000. So then from there, how many student athletes go on to play their sport professionally? It's less than 2%. So if you're thinking right now, you are hoping to get a 2% scholarship opportunity. Then from there, you're hoping for an even lesser, smaller percentage, which is 2% going pro. So the chances are pretty small from where you are right now to be playing this sport for the rest of your life to set you up for success. So it is so important that you academically prepare yourself for getting a college degree, for having other opportunities. The average NFL career is between 3 and 4 years. So what are those individuals doing that's setting themselves up for success and their families up for success? They're making sure that they're getting their college degree completed. They're making sure that academically they're working just as hard in the classroom because they know what that 10-year plan looks like for them. and they're going to have other things, whether they want to go in broadcasting, whether they want to go in business. What is their plan when that ball stops? So start thinking about those things now to set yourself up for a legacy and not for a short-term starting position at a school. All of those are extremely important. And then we talked about it earlier, but researching through those interactive maps and information on what division and what sport that you're interested in and what the recruiting timelines are around those sports as to when coaches can recruit throughout the year. And then I always tell student athletes, conduct yourself in a positive manner in the class, in practice, in games, at home, in your community, and online. I have presented with D1 coaches, D2 coaches from all across the country, and parents will say, or students will say, like, hey, coach, how do I get recruited? And every single time I hear these coaches say, before I ever have any interaction with you to recruit you, I'm first going to be finding out through your school, through your coach, how you are. I'm going to go into the guidance office and I'm going to get a copy of your transcript. I'm going to find out what kind of student you are. I am going to have my coaching staff do a social media dig. Are you a risk to our university? If you're posting stuff online that may look reputationally bad for their team or their university, that's going to stop the recruiting process right away. I can tell you that. So being mindful of how you conduct yourself. You hear all the time about coaches that go and recruit a player and then they follow back up at a game that they know that that player is not going to be playing in. So maybe it's, postseason where you're having to sit for whatever reason because they know that coach isn't going to play the starters because this one doesn't count. You've already gotten an automatic bid or something. They're going to go back and find out what type of teammate are you when you're not on the court or on the field. So just always being mindful that someone is always watching you. Things that you talk about, if you're being heavily recruited and you're walking around in certain gear for a certain school, there are always eyes and ears on you. And in this day and age with everyone having phones, so always conducting yourself in the best manner possible is going to set you up for the most success in this process. And then we talked about the best practices of emailing coaches. So you have that information now. And then if you have the opportunity to go on visits, do so. But if not, check out the virtual options for free. They allow you to take a campus tour virtually to check that school out. So maybe it's a point where you're not old enough to do those visits yet, which typically happen junior and senior year. Start taking a look at some campuses on their virtual online options to get a good feel for what that campus is like and if it's something of interest to you. And then we have more information if you're interested in it on name, image, and likeness. So you can view that at on.ncaa.com/NIL. I don't have the specific information on hand if Virginia is a state that allows NIL activities at the high school level. Jonathan or Yannette, I don't know with a thumbs up or thumbs down if either of you know. But you can always research that information and follow up with your coaching staff at your high school. There have been some changes to NIL disclosure requirements, so you can learn more about that on our website. But effective for any NIL deals that were signed from July 1st of this year and forward, you will have to disclose those to the NCAA school that you are planning to attend once you arrive on campus. That's through the College Sports Commission. So make sure you're just keeping track of that information. If we have any student athletes joining us who are signing NIL deals or partaking in NIL deals or considering to do so, that you're going to need to keep very good records of that because you will be required to disclose that once you arrive to campus through NIL Go with the College Sports Commission. And then athletics aid. So again, that is a scholarship and athletics aid agreement. Those are completely voluntary signing with a school. Doing so does end the recruiting process for you, meaning if you sign with one school, none of the other schools are allowed to communicate with you or recruit you. So it provides for a minimum of one academic year, that scholarship for that school, but you must also be admitted to the NCAA school in order to be eligible to receive that athletics aid. And then you also must meet NCAA initial eligibility requirements to be eligible for financial aid under NCAA rules. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up with a few resources that I have for you here. If you have any questions after today's presentation, you can scan this QR code and that will take you to the information on connecting with the NCAA Eligibility Center. If you also go to our website at eligibilitycenter.org and click on the Contact Us button, that will get you all of the contact information to our customer service team that can help you out with any additional questions that you might have for us. And then the phone number for that customer service team is also right here on the screen, and they're open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. And
All
that
right.
covers everything.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We truly appreciate you coming on and just providing this information for our families. And to you all, thank you for joining us today. A copy of today's video recording, as well as the presentation and any additional resources, will be provided to you in a follow-up email. I have also placed in the chat the survey for tonight's session. Let us know how we're doing and what kind of information or presentations you would like to see in the future. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you.